Welcome to Control Your Career, a podcast to help you conquer uncertainty, shatter imposter syndrome, and rise above the expectations imposed by others. My name is Julia Toothaker, and I am the career coach and strategist at Ride the Tide Collective, my career development company where I offer career coaching courses, and I have a plethora of free content. I have been doing this work for over a decade, and I want to help empower professionals like you to find clarity, navigate your current career with finesse, and propel yourself toward career advancement in alignment with your unique personality, preferences, and values. This podcast is a great place to start your journey toward controlling your career. Season 10 is all about managers and specifically what managers want and expect from their employees and teams. I've brought on managers with at least 10 years of experience managing who are also currently managers to help you understand their mindset and expectations. Each episode will have action items that you can apply to your unique situation and consider in your relationship with your manager. You can find this episode and more at ridethetidecollective.com. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn, where I post career information and inspiration to help you control your career. Welcome, everyone. We are back with another episode from the manager's perspective. And my guest today is probably one of my best friends at this point because his wife is one of my best friends. And you know how that goes. We're all connected. He's friends with my husband. It's just one of those situations. But I love that. I love having people on that I know that have like pretty cool jobs. And I think he does. So Mike Farris is here with us today. And he is the Senior Customer Service Manager at Zep Sales and Service. And I'm sure most of you know Zep, the cleaning product company. I'm sure you have used a lot of their products as I have. I've been what is it, like, influenced by you working at Zep now. So we're definitely purchasing their products a little bit more than we used to, I think. But Mike, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you as a guest on the podcast.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And yes, and I do appreciate you buying Zep products. It keeps me off the streets during the day. Thank you.
Yes, yes. All right. I want you to do an introduction of
Sure.
yourself because I know that you have such an extensive history, especially within people management. So why don't you let our audience know kind of who you are and where you've come from through your career?
Sure. Well, I actually started in the bowling industry many, many moons ago and started at the bottom, got into management in there, assistant manager, general manager, and so on. And then I left that because we started a family. So I got into other management jobs and got in with Zep actually 24 years ago. So started at the bottom, moved my way up and got into the position where I am now and have managed countless numbers of people in various age ranges, various times in their careers, whether it be, something just starting out, this is their first job. It was I want a job that I can just, take home a check every week and don't want to have a lot of responsibilities. So there's been a variety of folks that I've managed, all really good people. And, everybody was just in a different space at the time. So, but
Awesome. Awesome.
yeah.
So I love this because it sounds like management has been something that kind of gravitated to you and found you from very early in your career, which isn't
Yeah.
that common for everybody. A lot
Right,
of
right,
times
yeah.
it can take a long time to get to that. So I'm excited to have your perspective here today. So jumping into that, let's talk about your overall people management style. How would you describe that? And then how has it evolved over the years?
I think I try to be hands off when I can. I feel like though, you need to give your employees the correct training, proper training in the areas they're going to be working in, and guidelines, goals, so that they have expectations. So you set those expectations for them to be able to do their job, and then you let them do their job.
Mhm.
So I follow up with them uh, on occasions. We have ways of checking just how they're doing, the things that they're doing each day. So I'll, periodically check in with them. So, things have changed over the years where you were in the office and we're currently not in the office.
Mm.
So everything now is virtual. So it's been a change. It had to change the management style a little bit to to keep up with
Mhm.
just the way things are currently. So it's if you have to be able to change with those types of situations. So especially, from COVID, and that's really what started it. So
Okay, I have a side question, and I may or may not cut this out of the interview, but I
of
feel
course.
like I have to ask it because there's a lot of noise right now around companies that are forcing people back into the office and in some cases firing them if they don't return to the office. Zep is one of the companies that has kept people remote or allowed them to transition to remote. I want to know, as a manager, have you seen any change in productivity between your team being in the office physically or remote?
Not in my case, because you know, we're able to track what they do.
Mhm.
So we have programs that we use that they use on a daily basis uh, that calculates their calls all the times,
Mhm.
the various things that we ask them to do. We use a couple of different programs for create cases for particular issues, and so we're able to really see what they're doing on a daily basis. So you you lose that one-on-one
Mhm.
factor that you used to have, that a lot of people, that some people enjoyed, which I did. So I'm a little bit of a people person, but I meet with them on a regular basis. We have calls on a regular basis because you still have the same issues, but it it was just a change in how you know were able to relate to your employees.
Mhm.
And so and there really hasn't been any expectation for us to go back, because I think if we didn't have that reporting capability, it might have been a different outcome. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that because I know that's something
Yeah.
that's been going around. And so to hear
Yeah.
from a people manager who's actually gone through it, I think is helpful for some people to see, there are companies that are still working remote and doing it well, and it's okay.
Right. And some of our departments weren't able to do so because they were hands-on. So our warehouse folks, they were in the warehouses,
Right.
and you're not able to, it's kind of hard to ship when you don't have anybody shipping. So you can't
Right.
really do that from home. So we were us and several other departments had that capability. And so they found that, again, that we were able to keep track of their performance, and they were doing great. So we really didn't have an issue. And plus, I think too, some of the employees were happier. Some missed it again because of
Right.
that, the face-to-face, interactions. But I think a lot of them, they're talking pretty regularly just through the phone. And again, we do regular meetings with them so they can, it's on camera,
Hmm.
sure,
Hmm.
but you at least get to, keep up with what they're doing and just have some interactions and so on. So
Yeah, amazing. Well, let's talk about the hiring process because I know this is something that I've been talking to all my guests about to get an understanding of what you as a people manager is looking for through that process. So, when you are hiring somebody, I'm going to get into nuts and bolts here. What are
Yep.
you looking for on a resume and in the interview process from someone?
Well, starting with the resume, based on, what the role is that I'm looking for. So for a while, besides customer service, I also did credit. So credit being accounts receivable. And so depending on what the role was, I'm looking for applicable experience. So, did they have this, these certain things on their resume? If it was credit, did they have collection, responsibilities in the past?
Mhm.
Did they, what was sort of their follow up? How many calls did they make a day and so on? What sort of customer interaction did they have is really what I was looking for. On the customer service side, did they work in a call center or something like a call center? Was it inbound? Was it outbound? Because most of ours are inbound calls. Did they work with a sales team?
Mhm.
So, I was looking for people that had, similar experiences to the responsibilities that I knew that they would have. So, and I was pretty flexible on that because, you can adapt, most people to the position if they have those core values and what they're doing, you can teach them the job.
Mhm.
So is really what it is. And so when I was looking for those folks, I also had to take into account, okay, who do I already have on the team? And I know the personalities, the experience of the employees that I had on the team. So I'm looking for somebody that, of course, is going to meld with the team that I already have,
Mhm.
so that, of course, they get along better, they're more productive. That's really what I looked for. And a lot of times you could find that out in the interview with
Mhm.
just how their reactions were to questions, how personable they were. So in some cases, like when I was looking on credit team, I was looking for somebody that was a little more assertive because I didn't want somebody that
Mhm.
was quiet that was going to go call a customer and say, "Hey, I need you to pay us money." So so I needed somebody that had a little go get 'em attitude and was willing to go out there and say, "Hey, you owe us money." So, it was, in customer service, it's a little bit different because you're not out there trying to get money, but you're out there usually resolving issues and in a lot of cases taking orders. And so with their ability to provide that type of service and think ahead in some cases like, okay, hey, we noticed you bought this last time, you didn't order it on this order and it's been a few months, and you sometimes get a reaction of, oh, I forgot about that, thank you. So
Mhm.
looking for folks that would, sort of anticipate what the customer's needs were in addition to dealing with the sales department. We had
Mhm.
commissioned sales reps, so there was a lot of expectations from them to handle issues quickly. So you needed somebody that could resolve those types of things. And that's really what I was looking for. And sure, you're only going to find out so much information in an interview, but a lot of times it's your best guess when you have, people that you're working with and you have, 5, 10 different people you're talking to. So
Right, right. I
yeah,
think this is such a good point in terms of your personality fitting or aligning with the type of work that you're doing. And people don't always do this. I mean, as a career coach, I see people who have been in fields that their personality does not really match, and they fight against that every day because they realize that something is wrong. And when you talked about the credit and you're looking for somebody that can really make those phone calls and not
right,
get flustered by having to do that. That's such a great example of that. And I want to bring this up because I think for a lot of people, they're in positions because they had to, right? They were in a situation where they didn't have a choice to take a job,
right,
or maybe they got pushed into something by somebody else or something like that. But I
mm,
think this is a good reminder that if your personality doesn't necessarily fit with the type of work that you're doing, you
right,
might want to reevaluate that and see if there's an area that you can shift into that would be a little bit more natural for you. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It just
right,
means that it's gonna test you a little bit more and create, in some cases, a little bit more anxiety, probably depending on what it is. So I
right,
appreciate you bringing that up.
right. Yeah, it's and it's not that I didn't, that I had folks that just really weren't right for the position.
Mhm.
And, they knew it and I knew it. And it was, again, because you're in an interview and you hope to ask all of the right questions to get the information that you need to make a hiring decision amongst,
Mhm.
2, 3, 4 people sometimes, depending. our operation was small. We didn't have a 300 person, call center where
Mhm.
most of the time it was, 8, 10, 12 people. And, so you had to, again, take those things into consideration. And, they weren't just going to like blend into a crowd. They were going to be there in a cubicle with, 3 other people right next to them and 4 other people over on the other side of the wall. And you were going to be able to hear those other people in some cases. So,
Right.
so you really needed to find, folks that, weren't used to being on a bullhorn talking at, whatever event. So you needed somebody that was, okay, I need you to collect money, but not too loudly. So, so, and so you get a lot of times you could tell that just based on sort of your level of interaction when you were doing the
Right.
interview. So
Right,
yeah.
right. Okay, so let's kind of transition that into choosing the best candidate because I would imagine, and if I'm wrong, let me know, but Zep is a well known organization and customer service can be a pretty popular um, area for a lot of people to go into. So if you have got two candidates that have basically the same qualifications and are presenting very similarly, how do you make those hiring decisions? How do you choose the best one in that moment?
Well, it goes back to again the responses to the questions. You may have similar backgrounds. So the resumes look very close. They have a lot of the same experience. They have education. They have all of those things. So I think the interview questions that I was using, it basically covered 10 different aspects
Mm,
of what they would be doing in a way. So there was never a yes or no question.
mm,
It was always something that made them tell me a story, made them give me more than a one sentence answer. And so out of that, a lot of times you can find some little differences that can help
mm,
you determine, which is the right person. And then again, going back to the personality aspect, when they're presenting themselves in an interview too, is what kind of a feeling am I getting talking to this person? So, and when you get into the personality piece, you find some differences.
mhm,
Is this person going to get along with the people that I already have? And you sort of get a feeling from that. And it's not always right.
mhm.
I've had times where, the person got on the job and they just didn't fit in. So we found other underlying issues that were going on that you're not going to discover in an interview. But again, I sort of try to compare their background and look what's best for it and then just see sort of how I feel in an interview. And then I also would have one of either my leads or a supervisor come in and then also
Mm,
maybe ask some questions just to someone that was closer to the team on the floor to get a better sort of a different aspect of the candidate too. What were they
mhm.
feeling about these two? Hey, I've dwindled it down to these two. Go in there and ask them a couple of questions, and they knew what the guidelines were. Nothing that you weren't supposed to ask.
Right.
But and me being male, I had many of the workers I have working for. In fact, the crew that I have now, I have 9 ladies working for me in 2 different states. So I've always had ladies working for me. They've always been just the best. And the supervisor was usually female. And so they would come in and they would ask those questions, of course, different perspective. And then
Mhm,
they would give
mhm,
me their feedback. And so I think if if you're not getting that second perspective for a person
mhm.
from that's, in a different position, then I don't feel like you're giving them a fair chance. So,
Mm,
because then you are just looking at it from your point of view versus giving them an opportunity to shine with, say, somebody else. Maybe
right.
they were intimidated by me because I was a man, and
Mhm,
they talk a little bit more about to my female supervisor.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
yeah, so I
Okay,
try to look at all of that.
Yeah, I love that you brought this up because this is not something that gets talked about a lot from the interviewing side. And I think, I've known a lot of human resources people, and I think that they try to encourage exactly what you're talking about. But sometimes that's not always possible depending on the situation or the makeup of the team.
Right.
But I think what you're talking about is so huge for teams that have the ability to do something like this. So if
Mhm.
it is, and I think it goes both ways, right? Male to female, female to male, whatever that looks like, because you just never know somebody's situation. You never know their background. You never know what they have been through. I know that I have had supervisors and managers that have looked a certain way.
Right.
And actually, in my case, it's been females that I've had the hardest time with. I know you're laughing because you know that.
I have a
But
little bit of insider knowledge on that.
a little bit. But because of that, I'm actually more nervous when I am interviewing with females than I am with males. And so if you think about that in your hiring process, I think this is such a great thing to bring up, especially not only if you have to decide between two candidates, but I think just as a general practice to
Right.
see what somebody else's perspective is going to be. Hey there, Julia here. Is this episode resonating with you? Maybe it's got you questioning how you can better communicate with your manager, team, or just learn more about how to control your career. Well, I've busted into this episode to tell you about my career action coaching. Career coaching is more than job search and resumes. It's also about managing the day-to-day situations that come up in your career. This coaching option is perfect for the career management situations that you're dealing with, along with other career related challenges or goals. This is a flexible coaching option to help tackle specific topics to move forward efficiently and confidently. Not all coaching requires a 6-month commitment. Career action coaching is 3-hour-long sessions that can be customized to your unique needs. Before committing, let's discuss what you need in my complimentary career coaching clarity call. The link will be in the show notes and the description for this episode. Now let's get back to the show. The other thing I wanted to bring up that you mentioned early on was kind of those little nuanced things that come out within an interview. Because
Right.
I think sometimes, obviously people get nervous in the interview. And that's one thing. I think if you've interviewed enough people, you understand what nerves looks like and sounds like.
Right.
But
Right.
some people also show up with almost an air of indifference toward the interview. That doesn't always happen, but I think sometimes you can get a feel in terms of somebody that's like really excited about the position and wants it and is in the way that they speak and how they answer questions sounds different than somebody that maybe is, I would say, phoning it in a little bit. Doesn't mean that
Right.
they're not qualified, that they can't do the job, but their
Right.
their level of just drive to want to show up is different. Does that make sense?
Right. No, it does completely. And agreed. So I've interviewed hundreds of candidates, so you can see the different personality types. You can tell when somebody's nervous. And so, I didn't really explain it very much either. So I never interview from behind a desk.
Mm,
So in my office and where I was doing the interviews, I put two chairs facing each other. So that
interesting.
way we're on the same level. So my
Mm,
job is to make sure you're the right person for the job that I have available, but I don't want to sit behind a desk and show you that I'm superior.
mm,
So I don't like that. I want to know the real person that's sitting in front of me, not being intimidated by 7 feet separation of a desk.
right, right.
So I always interview face to face. I leave the door cracked, especially with if I have female candidates. And but I want to know the person. So, and I feel like getting to be able to know that person is making sure that they're comfortable in the interview.
Mhm.
So, so we'll start out. I usually will start out with some those types of questions to try to get them at ease so I can find the real person that's in there behind the nervousness and the shaking and, you know,
Yep. We've
and
all been there.
the gripping the armrests and, so, and that's really what I'm looking for, is because I want to know what that person's going to be like
hmm
once they've gotten the position. So not, sitting across from me in a chair hoping to get the position. So, and sure, some people are just more comfortable in that type of setting when they can handle that type of pressure, if you want to call it, for lack of a better word. So,
Yeah. And I want to point out something too that maybe not everybody understands in terms of power differentials and all of that, but what you were describing with the desk. So as soon as you put essentially a piece of furniture in between two people, especially if it's an office and a desk situation, but this can happen even at a table. A lot of people will do interviews at like a round table or something like that, or a conference room table. It
right,
automatically creates an intimidating power differential
right,
between the interviewer and the interviewee. So that's something to think about. This is kind of more on the manager's side, but if
right,
you're a manager listening to this, that's
right,
something to think about. But even I think as an employee, what you're talking about is automatically trying to put somebody at ease and all of that. And that
right,
is, I think, so rare these days that I see that. I think a lot of managers, and I would say this is more inexperienced managers, they're trying to create a power differential of
right.
like, you need to respect me, which I'm like, respect is earned, but that's fine.
That is true. That
But
is
if
true.
it starts in the interview where you're trying to intimidate people, like
Right.
that's not going to be helpful for you in the long run because now you're already creating a level of distrust by doing that. So I'm so glad that you brought that up because that's something that I
Well,
don't think many people think about.
yeah, and I think too, as an interviewer, as an interviewee, I hope that and I guess maybe from an interviewee's perspective, because it's been a long time since I've had to do an interview. I mean, 24 years at Zep, it's haven't really done too many. So, but I think too, it's again, if the position is something that you really want to go for, if you as the interviewee can sort of ignore, if you can kind of ignore that piece of furniture and, keep your eyes to eyes and keep that constant
Mhm,
eye contact and sort of take that out of the equation and, realize that the person behind the desk has a job to do. You're in front of the desk and you're trying to get the job that said person behind the desk has. It's, you know, the best thing you can do is, put your cards out on the table, lay out your qualifications, education, experience,
mhm,
and so on, and just present yourself in a positive manner. And that's, really to me, what I was looking for was somebody that was, confident in their abilities, had what I need in the past, what they've done with their experience. And, really, but again, my personality is different. I don't
mhm.
like the power struggle thing. So I would
Right.
again rather find somebody who we can just sit back and talk with each other about different things, because that's how I like to deal with my employees, is just have a conversation.
Yeah.
And, you know, but, of course, I like them to know what the expectations are of the job. Here's what you need to do. Here are the goals I need you to obtain, whether it's monthly, it's yearly, whatever. And then here's training. And I
Mhm.
sit them with somebody for a month. And so, but I'm looking for that person that's willing to, you know, to, to do that and be involved in the job and understand that, I need somebody long term. I'm not looking for
Mhm.
a 3-month gig.
Right.
So
Right. Okay, I think that segues perfectly into the next question.
yeah, I was reading the questions you had. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, wait, how can we work this?
So let's talk about one-on-ones. You have that person hired, you have your team. What do one-on-ones look like? How do you conduct them? What's the expectation there?
So similar to the interview process, I don't like to use the desk as a barrier in between us. So a lot of times because I had chairs that are, my office I inherited a big office, so it was kind of neat. So, I would sit in my chair, but I would have the person over here on the side of my desk because just because we need to have a chat about performance or whatever happens to be doesn't mean that I want to alienate them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's generally in that it's a calm tone. Here's the data.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I saw. Here's, email that I got. Here's a phone call that I listened to, something like that. And it's really just making sure that the employee understands that this is what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on severity of it, it's not acceptable. You know what the policies are of the company. So, you know, sometimes it's not necessarily a policy issue. It's, hey, when you were talking to so and so, this particular customer, you know, I would have used different language. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe something a little more subtle versus, look, we're going to shut you off if you don't give me the $500 that you owe us. Okay, yeah, just bring it down a little bit, something like that. And so, but it's the same thing. They're still a person. You've hired them to do a job, but the job has expectations.
Right.
So I'm not going to dehumanize somebody because they did something wrong, whether policy, whether whatever, because it's, that's just, I don't know. I'm not sure what the right word for it is, but it's just not a nice way to treat someone,
Right.
I guess. no, matter,
No.
no matter what position you're in.
Right.
So, and then it's a matter of, following policy, and then you give them what the expectations are to improve. And
Mm-hmm.
so then you
Mm-hmm.
track it, and you follow up with them in whatever that time period is to see how well they're doing. Many cases, they didn't realize what it was, or they weren't really pay attention. Something was going on in their
Mm-hmm.
lives that, you try to work around with them and be flexible to a point. Some
Right.
were, they were just blatant, things that they did that you really had to write them up for. And that is, look, you can't do that. The
Mm-hmm.
policy says this. Here's here's all of the documentation that I have. I'm putting this down, and, here you go. Here's the form. I need to see improvement within, 3 weeks, 3 months, whatever happens to
Right.
be.
Right.
And then you follow up from there. And sure, there's been times in a lot of cases, attendance, where you have to let people go because they
Right.
weren't following attendance. It's,
Right.
it's, nothing, against the person personally, but you failed to meet the conditions of the job. Therefore, I need to find somebody else to do that.
Right.
And,
Right.
it's not anything extreme. Look, I just need you to be here on time.
Right.
So just
Right.
just be here on time. Turn the phone on when you get here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really what it is.
So I want to point out something because this is different than I would say the majority of my other guests. And I think that it's because it's customer service.
Mhm.
And so I want to point this out in terms of the type of work that you're doing and the function that you're doing. The one-on-one system, the reporting system, the tracking system is going to look different. And so it's what I'm hearing from you is because customer service, and this is pretty common for like call centers and things like that, is so heavily tracked that when you're meeting with people regularly, it is really about addressing what has happened, whether that's a positive thing, maybe you excelled in everything, you didn't have any issues, like, yay, good job,
Right.
or it's, hey, we got this complaint, what you were talking about. So it's going to look a little bit different. And I think that's very interesting because most of my other guests, it's really, conversations about development and all of these other things. It doesn't mean that that doesn't happen here, but I
Right.
think it's important to understand as a professional listening to this that your one-on-ones are going to look a certain way depending on what the expectations are of the type of work that you're doing. And so this type of customer
Right.
service work that's tracked, or even you were talking about what was it? The collections, right? Like
Right.
those are all things that are tracked and kind of performance based in a lot of ways. And so you're going to get that feedback more regularly than somebody in a different type of position. Am I pretty right on with that? Because I know you've
Yeah.
managed it in different ways, but
Yeah. And sometimes it's, something was done in the past. And so you're trying to follow up
Mhm.
on something that, hey, you remember when you talked to this customer a month ago? So so yeah, and again too, it's because we do track those types of things. Sometimes things don't show up, for several
Mhm.
weeks, and so you're sort of trying to follow up on that because you don't necessarily know something that happens immediately. Of course, you get an email, you get a phone call from
Right.
a customer, from a sales rep, whatever it happens to be, and say, I just got off the phone with this person, and that happens. And
Mhm.
so I think for the most part, I don't think I've really ever had to call anybody in for that. So it, again, but it is a different type of conversation, and it really just
Mhm.
depends on what it is. Again, too, if it's a
Right.
performance based or if it's customer service based, you're going to have different types of interactions with customers. And I think too, we're in the past I had worked for retail, and so you were speaking to the public, and versus the team now speaks to generally businesses. It's a
Mhm.
business to business relationship. So you have a different interaction when you're not when you're not dealing with individuals, people's
Mhm.
money and stuff. You generally have a less emotional type of interaction with the customer.
Right.
So because it's business related, and people generally respect each other on a business to business relationship, unless of course your person is just outright abusive.
Mhm.
So
Right.
fortunately I haven't had that. So,
Okay, I have another follow-up because I know Zep is now remote, which is actually fairly new, since the pandemic has happened. And a
right,
lot of the examples you've given have been in the office environment because that's where you spent the majority of your time, right?
right.
So, how does that now translate to the remote space? Like, are you finding that with interviews and one-on-one conversations, are you finding that there's still that personability, that comfortability that you had before, or does it look a little bit different now?
Well, and to be honest, I haven't had to hire anybody since
Oh,
we were out of the office.
okay.
So unfortunately, I can't speak to that. So on
That's
people that
also
I
good. That means you have good retention.
correct. Yes, yes. I will say I have 100% retention. So even, and I'll pat myself on the shoulder a little bit too. Even the folks that I had hired 11 years ago, she still works for me. And so a couple of the other ones that are 10 and 11 years, they got moved to the other manager, but they still work for the company. So I feel like I did a pretty good job hiring. So, well, and I will tell you too, one of my credit reps that I had hired for 13 years ago or whatever, she is now credit manager for North America. So yeah,
Nice.
and she's awesome too. Yeah, she's really awesome. She is. So anyways,
There you
um,
go.
so yeah, see, then I went and lost track of what I was thinking because I was patting myself on the back. So
The
um,
interactions
right, the interaction.
remote now.
Right, right. So yeah, so it's different because you of course just you can't get up from your desk and go down the hall. And that's really what it was. You could stand behind your folks, you could go up next to them, you could pull up a chair next to them and talk about things. um, they would call you, you go down there, and you could sit right next to them and resolve whatever issue it was. And it
Mhm.
may not necessarily been with a customer, it could have been with a particular issue with the software program, the one that we use. So you now have, unfortunately, you have messaging that I'll get through messaging. Sometimes it's through email. They still call, on the phone program and call, but you sort of lose that human interaction,
Mhm.
the face-to-face interaction that you lose because just you're not there.
Mhm.
So you can still have great conversations, and we do. We can still joke and kid and so on and so forth, but it's just a different feeling than when you
Mhm.
used to be in the office like that, and you could do, you know, Christmas parties, you could do
Right.
employee things that you got together, you did safety meetings, and you kind of made the safety meetings fun. Well, what do you tell an employee now that they're home? Look, just don't trip over your dog while you're at home and working. So, you can answer the phone. So, I mean, so it's, so you kind of have to come up with different ways of, keeping the team together. And so we do regular calls. Everybody has to be on camera. And so, and they're well aware of it in advance. I don't usually just do a pop-up phone call and said, hey, by the way, I probably wouldn't have worn that today, so, but so I think though it's just created a different dynamic
Mm,
that it just, you have to change with the times. You have to change your management style with the times. Again, I can't walk down the hall and, drag somebody by their ear down the hallway to talk to them. So I have to, do it virtually, you know.
right.
So it's, but again, I mean, it's, you have that, the tracking capability. It's, you just lose that human interaction, which I like.
Hmm.
Um, but I like the job that I do. So, I really appreciate, my employees and what they do. And I will tell them at every meeting, hey, thanks for everything you do every day, and that's because, they need to hear that.
Right.
And so, and I think when you have that disconnect now with being out of the office and being remote, it's almost sometimes I feel like you need to do it a little bit more
Mm,
and to sort of keep that connection there because I don't see them.
right.
No, I don't see them. So, and it's, and I think I was sort of used to it already because uh, I used to deal with folks in Dallas. I used to deal with folks in Canada, and I had 20 people under me at a time. So I had supervisors in both locations, and I flew up to Canada on regular occasions. But
Right.
you, I think I was sort of almost already prepared because I did everything virtually back then or over the phone.
Right. Right.
So it wasn't a hard transition,
Mm,
but it was a transition.
yeah.
So, now with everybody out of the office where I had half in and half out. So, but I think that's one of the things you have to consider too is, are you a people person? So is the job that you're looking for going to be remote? So how is that going to affect your productivity? You want that face to face. You
Yes.
like those being in an office with people. If that's the case, then are you willing to be alone in, you know, at a desk in your house?
Right.
So you have to really look at that as, as a job, a prospective job that you would want to take is,
Hmm.
what's the criteria for that job? And is that your personality? So,
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love all of that. Thank you for providing that perspective. I think that's really helpful for people that are not only trying to decide between in person and remote, but also understanding how things have shifted
right,
and what you've had to do and how you support your people. I think that's really helpful for not only, professionals to see, but even other managers to see
right,
how are you conducting yourself as a manager? Are you talking to your people positively? You
right.
think you are, maybe you're not. It's like a good little
Sometimes
temperature
question
check.
myself. Okay, wait, was that kind?
Right. Okay, now you sort of started to mention this in the one-on-one conversation, but I want to dive deep into PIPs or performance improvement plans. And it's sounding to me, obviously customer service again, it's a much more tracked function. There's a lot more information and data. And so when we talk about building a case, and I hate to put it that way, it's kind of like more of an HR thing, but when we're
Right,
talking
right,
about, if somebody has done something repeatedly, you have a lot of data where in a lot of other
right,
situations, it becomes more of like a he said, she said thing in some circumstances. So talk to me
right.
about PIPs. What does that look like? How, what do you have to do to get on one and can they recover and get off of them?
Yeah, well, so I think the first thing is you need to make sure that, the employee knows what's expected of them.
Mhm.
So if you never laid out the expectations, they shouldn't get in trouble for something that they didn't know they were supposed to be doing. So the first thing is you need to make sure they understand the expectations of the job. Okay, great. Here's what you're going to do. Now, in addition to that, did you train them properly in said job? So if they're missing a piece of something and then you call them in because now they're in trouble for them not doing something they didn't know that they were supposed to do or not supposed to do, to me, I find that very unfair to the person because I didn't do my job as a manager to either personally train them or have the training person train them. So if you gave them all of those things to be expectations, the goals, the training, you've checked with them to make sure that, yeah, they've been doing this fine for the last 3 months. We've had no issues whatsoever. And all of a sudden something happened. So now it's, and again, being able to track things, it makes it pretty easy. We can listen to calls, we can do things like that. So you can really listen to exactly what's going on, and you have a pretty good idea of how their day is going to go. So, with that, and for me, I have data that I can use to create said PIP, and we do have one, and it's probably pretty standard. It's a verbal, it's a written, it's another written, a final, and so on. But I've had situations where they just kind of needed a reminder, and
Mm-hmm.
everything turned out fine. And it was more of, and sometimes it was, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that.
Right.
So I've had some situations where, and probably more along the lines of attendance, of
Mm,
they knew what the policy was. You've brought them in, you've gone through the various steps in the PIP, and for one reason or another, they just couldn't seem to get here on time. So, and it was more of a lifestyle thing, really, is what it ended up being versus really anything else. It's like, look, you're choosing not to leave your house until 10 minutes before you're supposed to be here. So you missed 3 signals, you're late.
right.
So leave 5 minutes earlier or leave 20 minutes earlier. You have a break room. So sort of, I think, to answer your question more of in a roundabout way, it's yes, you can recover from it because in some cases, like I said, they just didn't realize they were doing something incorrect. And 3 months down the road, when I reevaluate, they were fine.
Right.
Some folks, unfortunately, can't get here, with the old standard time of 8 to 5, and that was just difficult for them to do that. And, we have a policy that we follow. And so it's like, look, I can get somebody else to do the job. I have, every time I go out, I can, find 20 people that want to work,
Mm-hmm.
and they're happy. That's what they want to do is customer service. So hopefully I'm answering your question right.
Yeah.
So yes, I've had situations where I've had to let somebody go. I've had situations to where they turned it around. Even attendance wise, they've turned it around. So
Right.
I feel like you could always turn it around, but I think what you really have to look at as the person is okay, what's really the root cause that I'm doing said task, said, thing that got me into trouble?
Right.
Is it, is it, really something that's like, wow, I didn't really realize that I needed to just get up 5 minutes earlier and I would be on time. It's something like that. Oh, I didn't really realize what I sounded like on the phone until you play a recording for them. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay. So, I think, it can go both ways. And I think it really ultimately depends on the employee and, looking at that situation. Now, of course, I've heard, times too where, sure, the manager didn't know what they were talking about. They really had no real, what do I want to say? They just really didn't have enough information or didn't ask the right questions
Mm,
or even make sure that the employee had enough training and had enough were understanding what the expectations were. So in that respect, the employee didn't necessarily do things wrong, but the
right.
manager failed to do said training or give those expectations. So as a new employee, it's making sure that you get those expectations. What's expected of me? What are my goals? Um, you know, how often are we going to meet, whether it's virtually, whether it's in person, so that we can talk about my performance,
Mhm.
things like that. So I think, if you do that and you're a little bit more assertive as an employee, then, you know, I feel like you're going to have a better relationship with your manager. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I feel like customer service in so many ways, because it's so tracked at most companies, it
right.
actually works in favor of the employee
Mhm,
so much more because
right.
you have to go through certain training modules to say the right thing. You have binders of information in front of you, or
Right. Right.
PDFs and things like that, and then you are being recorded.
Yeah.
So, where in certain environments, it really becomes he said, she said. Well, this is what I said to the customer, and this,
Right.
and this is that. And you don't always realize how you sound or how you come across because
Right.
maybe you have something else going on or you're frustrated by something else that happened or whatever. It seems to me like these are situations where you really do come with evidence of like, okay, here it is,
Right.
but at the same time, I think the approach of did you get training on this? Like, is this something that maybe we need to, do another round of training or they need to listen to it or whatever? It can be fixed. And I think this also supports the idea that a PIP should not be a surprise, right? Like,
Right.
if you've been talked to multiple times about the same thing and you've been written up at some point, you know what that process is going to be. And so people that are surprised by it, and I would say specifically in this
Mhm.
function, right?
Right.
It shouldn't be a surprise if you end up in that situation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and again, too, it's a two-way street, between the manager and between the employee.
Right.
If you as the manager are not just surprised, hey, just want to let for the last 4 months, you haven't gotten all the calls you were supposed to be doing. Okay. Well, could you have told me that maybe like month one?
Right.
And, hey, what's going on? And I think too, it's coming from a space of, as my wife says, curiosity. So I know. So throw that in there.
You knew we were going to
So
make a nod to her at some point in
you
this
knew I
episode.
was. You knew I was. Yes. So I think too, but so I've learned a lot about that, over the years, not necessarily from that, but I think just being in different situations and scenarios and seeing various employees. And sometimes too, going back to what you were saying,
Mhm.
customer service is unique because you can track it. And it's more so now than it ever used to be. So with the recording and with, all of the various KPIs that they're given and expectations that are given and all the tracking you can do because phone systems are much more automated now.
Mhm.
And so in the past, you had to go in and, sit next to them and plug your headset into them, but you're right there. So it's like, okay, well, I know you're listening, so I'm going to be really nice this time. So, so I think it's made it better, too. But I think with, in regards to other things too, I think again, it's the manager, but it's the manager's responsibility. And I think one of the things that I learned a long time ago too was called management by walking around. So
Mhm.
and 1 minute manager. And those were some of the things that I had learned way back when in training. And so you learn to get up off from your desk and
Mhm.
go see your people.
Right.
And so, and going back to from the employee perspective, if you're not getting that, somebody coming out to see you, if you're, in an office or whatever happens to be, then schedule time with your manager. Just see how you're doing. Just give you an update. And if the manager's doing their job right, they should allow you to have that time, whether
Right.
it's 5 minutes, it's 15 minutes, whatever it happens to be. Just, hey, how am I doing? Is there anything you need me to work on? And I think managers will look at it in a positive way. They should
Mhm.
in a positive way because, you have somebody that is generally interested in doing their job and wants to do a better job.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, I love that. Okay. I wanna leave it there and kind of do some wrap up now
Yep.
because I feel like we have covered so many things that I think are just helpful for people to know and understand. And I love even some of the nuggets from the manager side, right? Especially on the pips. It's not always on the employee. It is on the manager as well because they're responsible for their employees' performance in some cases, right? They
Right.
have to give them the information and support them well. So I'm so glad that you brought in that perspective as well, because it really shouldn't all be on the employee. So now, if you could give current employees any advice to be successful in their position and with their manager, what would that be?
Um, I think again, it's, I mean, you're really responsible for your own job.
Mhm.
So, you own that responsibility to show up every day and do your job as it was given to you, following the guidelines and so on. And I think that, again, you need to be a little more assertive than maybe you're used to in the past and
Mhm.
really make sure that you are doing the job that the company wants you to do. So that's really what it is. And again, you need to go and find that time. And if it's, your manager hasn't talked, well, guy never comes out of his office and, I haven't seen him in like a month and, or that he never calls me or whatever. Well, make the phone call,
Mhm.
send an email, go down the hallway and say, hey, could I get 10 minutes of your time? I just want to see how I'm doing. And kind of going back to what I said is it's sometimes that assertiveness that sort of helps you to shine a little more than, I hate to say it, the average employee.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's to, take ownership of your job and make sure that you're doing everything that you can do, especially if you really like the job. If you're just
Mhm.
showing up for a paycheck, that's different. But if you really like the job, you enjoy doing, in my case, customer service, and you like the fact that, hey, as soon as 5 o'clock hits, I'm clocking out. I have no responsibilities after that. That's his problem. So, but if you really truly enjoy the job, it's, taking ownership of the position, get that time in with your manager that you can to find out, hey, what can I do to improve? Hey, what's my next step? If I wanted to advance in the company, what do I need to do? So hopefully the manager sees that as a positive thing and will take 15 minutes out of his day per day, to his or her day, to talk about those things with you, because that's somebody from my position that it's like, okay, I like that. I can give this person some more responsibility. I can, hey, maybe down the road I can make this person my lead. Maybe down the road this
Right.
person can get advanced to supervisor. Hey, maybe this person's going to take my job one of these days. So, and I think that's, it's making sure that you get that interaction and getting that time in there to help, you know, improve yourself. And, if you're really there for the company, help the company to do well too. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my gosh. I love that.
yeah.
Mike, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I love when like the personal and professional life can collide in a positive way.
Right.
And I think that's what we've done here today. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
You are quite welcome.